The sound was wrong. That was the first thing Lieutenant Erin Walker noticed as she pulled herself through the maintenance shaft of the Constantine. The reactor core wasn't supposed to hum like that, not in that pitch. It was sharp, insistent, like a blade being dragged across glass. Sweat trickled inside her collar even though the air here was freezing, recycled too many times through filters that smelled faintly of iron and burnt ozone. She pushed forward on her elbows, muttering under her breath. Whoever designed this crawlspace should be shot. Her tool case scraped the metal as she wedged herself closer to the reactor bay. When she finally reached the service panel, she flicked on the light at her shoulder. The glow spread across cables that were trembling as if alive. That was not possible. Vibration ran through the conduits, pulsing in a rhythm that made the hairs rise on the back of her neck. She tapped her comm. Control, this is Walker. I'm at the auxiliary grid. Something's feeding into our lines that shouldn't be. You seeing the same spike? Static crackled back at her before the voice of Commander Huxley came through, clipped and irritable. We're seeing it. Keep your head in the game, Walker. Don't start guessing until you've got numbers. Yeah, well, the numbers are screaming at me, she said, pulling a scanner from her belt. The device flickered and whined as if it didn't want to look too closely. The readout made no sense. A surge was bleeding into their system, not from the reactor, but from the docking tether still attached to the alien dreadnought outside. Her throat went dry. The alien ship had been dead for 48 hours. No crew. No power. Just a drifting corpse they had lashed themselves to for study. She spoke lower now, as though the dark hull pressing against their own could hear her. Commander, I don't think this is bleed-off. Something's moving on their side. The silence that followed was worse than any answer. Then his voice came back, colder this time. You're telling me the graveyard just twitched? Not twitched, she said, eyes fixed on the cables that were now twitching for real, jerking like veins under skin. It's pushing back. A distant clang echoed through the shaft, traveling down the metal like a hammer blow. Erin's light flickered. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement farther down the line, something shifting just beyond the glow. She didn't breathe until the light steadied again. Walker, report, Huxley snapped. Her voice cracked despite herself. Sir, I think the ship is waking up. The clang came again, closer this time, resonating through the walls like someone was striking the hull from the inside. Erin shoved herself backward down the maintenance shaft, her boots scraping against metal. Her breath came fast, sharp in her helmet. She forced her comm steady. Control, I'm getting out of the grid. Something's alive in here. Alive. Huxley repeated, his tone almost mocking, as if she had slipped into panic. But beneath it, she heard the quick keystrokes of someone pulling up diagnostic screens. He wasn't brushing her off. He was scared too, but hiding it under authority. The lights in the shaft dimmed, one by one, until only her shoulder lamp cut through the dark. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She shoved harder, the case on her belt knocking against her hip. Then she froze. A sound was following her. It wasn't the metallic hum of conduits or the rattle of her tools. It was lighter, softer. A dragging shuffle against the inside of the walls. Every time she moved, it moved with her. Walker, talk to me, Huxley ordered. I'm not alone, she whispered. What the hell does that mean? It means, she said, pushing faster, you'd better send a team to seal this shaft, because if it's not in here with me, then it's in your deck plating. She reached the access hatch, kicked it open, and fell out into the corridor. The sudden brightness was blinding, strips of white light humming above her head. She rolled to her feet, one hand still on the hatch as though she expected something to claw its way out. But nothing came. Two Marines rounded the corner, rifles slung but eyes alert. They looked at her the way soldiers look at someone who just ran out of a fire, half ready to laugh, half ready to listen. You look like hell, one of them muttered. Check the shaft, she said, pulling her gloves tighter. Something was in there. I don't know what, but it was moving with me. The taller Marine shook his head. We cleared the dreadnought 3 times. Nothing's breathing in that wreck. Not breathing, Erin shot back. That's the problem. The Marine smirked at her choice of words, but the second soldier didn't. He met her eyes for a moment, saw the tremor she was trying to hide in her jaw, and didn't argue. He raised his rifle instead. "I'll look." She followed, against every instinct screaming to get as far from that hatch as possible. Inside, the shaft was empty. Cables swayed slightly, the way they do after a ship shifts orbit. Nothing dragged along the walls. No shadows waited in the corners. "You see," the first Marine said, his voice dry. "It's nerves. We've all been living under the shadow of those things too long. Makes people jumpy." Erin didn't answer. Her scanner was still in her hand, and the readout wasn't nerves. It was climbing. Higher. Faster. Power was building somewhere inside the alien vessel, pushing through the tether and into their systems. She tapped the screen with a gloved finger, showing the Marine. "If I'm jumpy, then tell me why a dead ship is trying to plug into ours." The soldier's smirk dropped. He didn't have an answer. The comm snapped alive in her helmet, Huxley's voice tight, hurried. "Walker, get to the bridge. The dreadnought just lit up half our sensors, and I don't know if it's charging weapons or something worse." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The hum of the alien power felt like it was under their skin now, a vibration in the walls, in the bones of the ship itself. Erin swallowed and turned toward the lift. The Marine with the smirk finally spoke, voice lower than before. "Lieutenant, if that thing isn't empty, what the hell's been sitting next to us this whole time?" The bridge was alive with noise when Erin stepped through the sliding doors. Voices overlapped, consoles beeped an alarm, and the low rumble of the alien tether vibrated beneath every panel like a heartbeat trying to sync with theirs. The crew of the Constantine was disciplined, but fear showed in the smallest ways. Hands tapping on consoles too fast, clipped replies that carried sharp edges, eyes darting toward the main viewport where the alien dreadnought floated like a tomb pressed against their flank. Commander Huxley stood at the center console, shoulders squared, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack. His voice cut through the chaos. "Lock every hardline to external feeds. I don't want that thing crawling through our systems." "It already has," Erin said, pulling off her gloves. Her voice was raw, roughened by the crawl space and what she thought she'd heard inside. Heads turned toward her. Not because of what she said, but because she had said it like she believed it. Huxley's eyes narrowed. "Explain." She stepped forward, dropping her scanner onto the nearest console. The readout flickered across the display, spiking like an erratic pulse. "This isn't bleed-off. The dreadnought is pushing power into us. The surge isn't random either. It's targeting specific relays." "Targeting for what?" Huxley asked. "I don't know," Erin admitted. "But it's deliberate. It followed me in the shaft. Every time I moved, the conduits pulsed harder, like it knew where I was." A silence followed, broken only by the steady blips of sensor alarms. The crew exchanged quick, unsettled glances. One of the comm officers leaned forward. "Sir, permission to cut the tether." "No," Huxley said sharply. "If that ship is coming alive, we need to know why. Command wants its tech stripped and cataloged, and if it's still functioning, it could be the most valuable find since Mars." "Or it kills us first," Erin said under her breath. Huxley heard her anyway. His stare locked on hers, hard as steel. "You're an officer, Walker. You're here to solve problems, not spread panic." The words stung, but not because of the tone. They stung because he wasn't entirely wrong. She had let her fear slip into her voice. She knew it. But the truth beneath it wouldn't go away. Before she could reply, a shout came from navigation. "Commander, I've got motion." Every head snapped toward the forward display. The dreadnought's hull, black and jagged as obsidian, shifted. Not with thrusters. Not with engines. The movement was subtle, almost like a ripple across its plating, as if the metal itself was flexing. Panels retracted and extended with insect-like precision. For a moment, it looked less like a ship and more like something alive testing its muscles after a long sleep. The bridge went silent. No one breathed. "Is it powering weapons?" Huxley demanded. No readings of charge, the weapons officer answered quickly. But, he hesitated, staring at his screen. Something's building inside. Not energy. Heat. The whole ship is climbing by degrees. Erin spoke before she thought. Like a body warming up. Lieutenant, Huxley snapped. If you don't have hard data. But his words were cut off by a new sound. A low resonance filled the bridge, deeper than any alarm, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. The sound wasn't coming from their ship. It was broadcasting from the dreadnought, a frequency that bypassed systems and lodged itself straight into the human ear. The comm officer clutched her headset, grimacing. It's not coded. It's raw transmission. Translate it, Huxley ordered. I can't, she said, voice shaking. It's not language. It's... The sound cut again, sharper now, modulating. The bridge lights flickered, and for an instant, every console showed the same thing. A pulsing sequence of symbols, jagged and fluid all at once, like writing made by something that couldn't decide if it belonged on paper or in code. Then, just as quickly, the symbols vanished. Somebody record that, Huxley barked. We did, the comm officer said, pale as ash. But the file's gone. Erased the second it finished. Erin felt her stomach twist. She glanced toward the viewport again, toward the massive shadow pressed against them. She thought about the silence inside those corridors, the cables twitching like veins, the dragging sound that had followed her. What if it isn't a ship anymore? She asked quietly. What if whatever crew was on board isn't the one running it now? The bridge crew stared at her, some with disbelief, others with unease that matched her own. Huxley gave no sign of what he believed. He just straightened, his voice flat. Then let's pray it doesn't decide to finish what it came here to do. Outside, the dreadnought's hull rippled again. This time, the motion spread outward, like a shiver traveling across its entire length. The tether groaned in protest, metal grinding against metal. And then the Constantine's lights went out. The bridge dissolved into darkness. For 3 long seconds, no one spoke. Only the hiss of emergency oxygen vents and the faint groan of hull plating filled the silence. Then, red strips along the floor flickered alive, painting the crew in blood-colored light. The sudden glow made their faces look pale and haunted, as if the ship itself had been gutted and they were the ones left bleeding. Report, Huxley barked, voice tight but steady. Primary systems offline, said the engineer at the rear console, her hands shaking as she ran diagnostics by touch. Comms are dead. Navigation's dead. Internal sensors aren't even blinking. It's like someone flipped every breaker at once. Backup power should be coming online, Huxley snapped. It's not. That answer brought the quiet again, heavier this time. The Constantine was not a small vessel. It carried redundancies on redundancies, designed so that even catastrophic failure left at least partial control. For all of them to die in the same breath, something had cut deeper than simple mechanics. Erin steadied herself against a console. The red light glinted off the sweat across her cheekbones. Sir, she said carefully, this isn't us. The blackout started the second that transmission hit. We didn't lose power. It was taken. Her words hung in the air. No one wanted to believe them, but no one could disprove them either. The Marine security chief spoke from near the lift, rifle now held across his chest. If something's crawling around in our systems, it's not gonna stop here. We should lock down bulkheads before it jumps shipwide. Do it, Huxley said. The Marine tapped his wrist console, only to curse under his breath. Controls are unresponsive. Bulkhead relays aren't answering. The comm officer added quietly, nothing's answering. Not even manual override signals. The low red glow felt oppressive, pressing on Erin's chest. She could hear her own pulse louder than the hum of the auxiliary systems. She glanced at the viewport. The alien dreadnought loomed there still, black against the distant stars, tethered to them like a parasite latched onto a vein. Its surface shimmered faintly in the red light, that strange ripple running down its length again. Commander, Erin said, forcing her voice to stay level, We need to cut the tether.
Oh.
If that thing has its hooks in our system, it's because we gave it a direct line. Huxley didn't look at her at first. His jaw shifted side to side, a man weighing orders against instinct. If we sever that line, we lose the chance to study it. Command. With respect, sir, Erin interrupted, her voice sharper than intended. Command isn't here staring at that thing while our ship dies under it. Whatever we thought we were learning, it's learning faster. The room went still. She felt the stares on her, not hostile, but strained, soldiers hearing their own fear put into words. Huxley's reply was cut short by a sudden, sharp hiss. The lights flickered, and something like static whispered through every speaker at once. Not voices, not exactly. Just broken fragments, stretched syllables, the sound of language unraveling. Bridge to engineering. Huxley barked into the comm, even though they all knew it was dead. I want a manual shutdown on that tether now. No response. The whispering grew louder. The red lights dimmed, brightened, then dimmed again, pulsing in rhythm with the sound. Every person on the bridge froze, staring upward as if the ship itself had found a way to breathe. Then it stopped. Silence. Dead silence. Erin's breath caught as her eyes flicked to the viewport. The dreadnought's hull wasn't rippling anymore. It was opening. Panels along its spine retracted with a slow, deliberate grace, revealing rows of glistening structures beneath. Not weapons in the traditional sense, but something stranger. Long, skeletal arms unfolded, covered in spines that seemed to flex against the vacuum. For a moment, it looked less like a ship and more like a carcass peeling open to expose what had been growing inside. Christ! Someone whispered. The Marine chief lifted his rifle as if instinct alone could bridge the void. That doesn't look like weapons. Erin swallowed hard. Her voice was thin but steady. No. It looks like it's reaching. The dreadnought's arms shifted toward the tether, curling around it like fingers wrapping a cord. Huxley's mask of command cracked for the first time. Cut it, he said, his voice raw. I don't care how. Cut it loose. Before anyone could move, the ship shuddered violently. Sparks burst from the forward consoles. One of the NAV officers cried out as his station spat a gout of flame, forcing him back. Erin grabbed a railing to keep upright. The tether was pulling them in. The Constantine's engines were cold, unresponsive, yet the alien dreadnought dragged them closer as if it were hauling prey into its stomach. The stars outside the viewport tilted. Thrusters are dead, the weapons officer shouted. We've lost control. Erin's scanner was still in her grip, its readout spiking off the charts. She stared at it with a cold certainty curling in her gut. It's not pulling the ship, she said. It's pulling us. Heads turned toward her. Huxley's voice was low now, almost a growl. Walker. What the hell does that mean? Her eyes met his in the bloody red glow. Whatever's inside that wreck, it doesn't want the ship. It wants us. The dreadnought's arms locked into place, their spines glinting in the starlight. The tether groaned. And with one final lurch, the Constantine began to vanish into the alien carcass. The first thing Erin felt when the tether finished pulling them inside was weight. Not gravity, weight in the air itself. A crushing heaviness that settled across her chest, making every breath taste metallic, as though the ship had been swallowed into something alive and it was pressing down on them from every angle. Emergency lights flickered weakly across the bridge. The viewports showed nothing but darkness now, a void so complete it was as though the stars themselves had been smothered. The dreadnought had sealed around them. Status, Huxley snapped, his voice hoarse. No stars, no comms, no power, the engineer muttered, her hands trembling as she tapped uselessly at her dead console. We're entombed. The Marine chief had already snapped orders, sending security to choke points with rifles ready, though none of them said aloud the obvious truth. Rifles felt meaningless against something that had just eaten a warship whole. Erin's scanner whined again, faint but steady. She lifted it, watching the numbers climb as a sick realization took root. It's in our systems. Not just the ship's hardware. It's crawling through everything. Life support. Navigation. Even our personal suits. If we give it more time, we're not going to have control of anything, including ourselves." Her words landed like a blow. Several crew members glanced down at their wrist consoles as if expecting them to come alive with foreign symbols. "What's our play?" the Marine chief asked bluntly, breaking the silence. For a moment no one answered. Then Huxley lifted his chin, resolve carved across his face. "We find its heart. We burn it out. The dreadnought's got a core, some kind of processing nexus, and that's where this corruption lives. If we don't stop it here, it spreads to the fleet. And then to Earth." Aaron's throat tightened. "Sir, if we go in there, we're not all coming back." His eyes flicked to hers. The steel in them wavered only slightly. "I know." The boarding team moved out in 2 squads, boots echoing across the dreadnought's interior. The corridors stretched impossibly wide, ribbed with blackened metal that pulsed faintly like muscle under skin. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was threaded with faint clicks and whispers that slithered through the air, never clear enough to call voices, but close enough that every soldier turned his head at least once. They passed rooms filled with restraints, chairs shaped for bodies not quite human. Some were cracked open, their surfaces slick with dried residue. In others, alien skeletons slumped forward, their bones fused with machinery, mouths open in expressions that could only be read as screaming. "Jesus Christ," one Marine muttered. "This wasn't a warship. It was a prison." "Then who were they keeping locked up?" another asked. Erin didn't answer. Her scanner spiked higher with every step, dragging them deeper toward the dreadnought's core. They reached it at last, a cavernous chamber where cables ran like arteries into a sphere suspended above a pit. The sphere pulsed with light, symbols racing across its surface too fast for the human eye to follow. It felt less like a machine and more like a brain, vast and restless, alive with something that didn't belong to flesh or metal. The moment they entered, their suit comms hissed. Distorted voices bled through, warped and broken, yet carrying a rhythm that felt familiar, almost human. "Stay!" it rasped, the words stretched into static. "Stay inside." One of the younger soldiers backed up a step. "It's talking to us." "It's copying us," Erin corrected, her hand tightening on her rifle. "It's not communication. It's mimicry." The Marine chief raised his launcher. "Orders, Commander?" Huxley's voice was grim. "We end it. Now." They fired into the sphere. Bullets sparked against its surface, explosives ripped across its cables, and the chamber shook with concussive thunder. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. The lights dimmed, the symbols slowed. Then the sphere pulsed once, hard enough to rattle teeth in their skulls. A shock wave of static ripped through their suits. Soldiers screamed as their HUDs lit with alien script, systems locking and unlocking on their own. One Marine dropped his weapon and clawed at his helmet, shrieking as his visor filled with blinding light. He collapsed, convulsing. "Keep firing," Huxley roared. They did. Erin emptied her rifle, then grabbed a grenade from her belt, pulling the pin with trembling hands. "Clear!" she shouted, and hurled it at the core. The explosion tore into the sphere, sending cracks racing across its surface. Light bled out in floods, symbols scrambling in panic. For the first time, Erin felt it, not just in the scanners or the ship, but in her head. A pressure, a scream, something furious and desperate trying to claw its way into her mind. She staggered, clutching her helmet, teeth grinding as she forced it out. "You don't belong here." The sphere split down the center. Liquid light poured out, cascading into the pit below. The chamber shuddered violently, tearing apart at its seams. "Fall back," Huxley ordered, grabbing Erin's arm and dragging her toward the exit. They sprinted through collapsing corridors, chased by flickering lights and collapsing walls. Marines fired blindly at shadows that twitched along the ceilings, shapes with too many limbs and not enough solidity to be real. The dreadnought groaned like a dying beast, its walls folding in on themselves. When they reached the docking bay, only half the squad was left. The rest were gone, swallowed by the ship without screams, without warning. Erin's chest heaved as they strapped into the Constantine's emergency shuttle. The Marines looked hollow, eyes wide, faces streaked with grime and sweat. No one spoke as the shuttle detached, engines flaring to life. Through the viewport, they saw it, the dreadnought convulsing, light spilling through its cracks until the entire carcass split apart. The tether snapped. The wreck folded inward, imploding on itself, until nothing was left but drifting debris. The shuttle soared free, and for the first time since the blackout, the stars returned. Hours later, back on Earth orbit, Erin stood in the debriefing chamber, helmet under her arm. Her uniform was scorched, her body bruised, her voice ragged. She gave the report flatly, mechanically, because if she let herself feel it, she wasn't sure she could stop. When she finished, the room was silent. Generals exchanged glances. Advisors whispered. Finally, one of them leaned forward. "And this infection? Is it destroyed?" Erin didn't answer right away. She thought of the symbols, of the voices trying to crawl into her head, of the dreadnought's final scream. She thought of how much of their systems had already been touched before the core cracked. Her eyes flicked up at them. "We slowed it. Maybe we burned it out here. But destroyed." She shook her head. "No. It's still out there. It's just looking for the next host." In the silence that followed, she almost expected to hear it again. That hum in the walls, that whisper in the comms. But all she heard was her own breathing, steady and human.